Hello, Malcolm here, and welcome to Teaching Tips, episode 298, part 5 of the series, also on how to speak to all generations. Today has been the last day of the conference I'm here in Oklahoma for. This is it, the Generation Z, the ongoing conversation put together by the Teleios Society, which I'm tremendously grateful for. And I've got lots to think about. I've made some notes. I'll tell you a bit about today's session in just a moment. I've also got some books to read. I picked one up on Kindle today, 40 questions around the women's role. This book here, The Future of Christian Spirituality in Our Lives, in Our Churches and in the Academy, by my friend Dave Proctor, thanks for breakfast, and John J. Markey. And this book here, Owning Faith, Reimagining the Role of Church and Family in the Faith Journey of Teenagers, and they're part of Gen Z. Edited by Dudley Chansey and Ron Brunner. So I'm going to be reading those. I shall start tonight, perhaps read a bit on the plane on the way home and get through them the best I can. So looking forward to that. The richness of everything that's come my way the last few days has been wonderful, both in terms of books, conversations, prayerful thinking as I've been out and about. I had a little walk this afternoon, praying and thinking about what I've sensed God has been teaching me here and how I should respond and what's relevant for me back home, and as well as the actual talks. But let me tell you a bit about this morning's talk by Dr. Amy McLaughlin-Sheasby, if I'm pronouncing that right, and her title, a bit of a long one, so let me get it right, Picking Up the Pieces, Cultivating Hope in a Traumatized Age. Hope and trauma, those were two words and concepts that have come up a lot the last few days. And it's a nice blend because trauma without hope is a bit of a mess. And in a sense, hope without trauma or without struggle, let's put it that way, maybe that doesn't really have much meaning to it. Jesus, you could say, went through some very traumatic experiences, but also lived a life of hope. And so did so many of the biblical characters. And indeed, so do we today. And in particular, the contention at this conference has been that Gen Z might be the most traumatized generation, at least generations that I might be connected with, those who are alive at the same time as me. And it might be hard to argue with that, at least generally speaking. Of course, not for everybody in every country, every culture, maybe, but perhaps in the West, and the effects of COVID on children as they've been going through their education and other issues to do with that, friends who might have died, or family or family friends, as well as what's going on in the media, and the fact that young people are more exposed to a torrent of often very negative information on the news and social media from friends or wherever, more intensely than we were, and they don't yet have the resilience that they have learned and been helped to develop that we perhaps do once we're older. And I think this is a very real issue, because although every generation is going to have its struggles, every generation is going to have its trauma, and no generation can get through to maturity without some struggle. Nonetheless, the pressures on the current young generation, Gen Z, does seem to me to be more in quantity and perhaps even in intensity, without, as I say, that time and opportunity to develop the resilience that they need in character and in faith, if they have faith, compared to previous generations, at least those that that are alive contemporaneously with myself. And that's some of what Dr. McLaughlin-Sheasby talked about today. I thoroughly recommend this talk. It's one of those I really do need to go back and listen to again, and maybe even again. I made a lot of notes. Any of you that are interested in trauma, you really need to listen to this lesson. Any of you interested in young people, working with young people in youth ministry or anything else like that, this is a talk you really need to listen to. She's got a lot of great experience through being a professor at Abilene, and engaging with, over a number of years now, Gen Z people, and even in the Gen Z people she's got to know as her students, there's been a shift in some of their issues over the last few years. Fascinating to listen to her. I'll give you a couple of highlights. She mentioned the fact that traumatized people will struggle with hope, and thus they'll struggle with faithfulness. And so if we don't help people don't help people to develop and work through their trauma, how are we going to help them with their sense of hope and thus on to faithfulness? Traumatic wounds haunt us, a bit like a ghost she talked about. These ghosts need a witness. They need to have their say before they can be healed, or before they can be let go of, and before they leave. She talked about ghost stories and how the ghosts have to tell their story and be legitimized before they can move on. Because those are stories and fine, but there's some metaphorical applicability here, I think, to the trauma that a lot of young people feel. It's got to be acknowledged, it's got to be validated before they can move on and move through it. Gen Z people don't have memories of a safer world. These are the kids who have grown up, especially in the United States, under the threat of what happened at 9/11, the Columbine shootings. Now schools that could end up having a shooting at them are quite common. Back in the UK, it's a little different, but I wonder, in particular in our large cities, about the prevalence of knife crime, for example, and how that's having an effect on pupils. Do they feel safe going to school? Do they feel safe coming home from school? I must admit, when I was a kid, I felt completely safe every day going to school or coming back from school. There were one or two occasions when some bullies were trying to have a go at me, but basically speaking, I never feared going to school. I never feared coming home from school, in the sense that perhaps a lot of Gen Z people do today. The world is an inherently dangerous place because every social interaction contains the possibility of being hurt. Every social interaction, talking there about social media, the back and forth of messaging, it can happen at any moment, at any time. Hurt and trauma was more compartmentalized when I was younger. These days, it can come in an instant, in a moment, on your phone. And to try and simply say, well, they shouldn't be looking at their phone, isn't particularly helpful and persuasive to a Gen Z person, generally speaking, because this is part of how they connect with the world and their friends. It's a generational difference that I don't, of course, really understand, and I think many of us don't. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. There's so much more wonderful material that she gave us, and in particular, I thought a very thought-provoking parallel with the demon-possessed man in Mark chapter 5 regarding trauma-informed approaches for the cultivation of hope, and how Jesus gives that person hope. That's for another time, or perhaps you would like to watch that yourself. You can find access to the recordings by going to the Teleios website, the conference website. The link is in the show notes. You do have to register for that, and you have to pay for that. This did cost something to put on, so that's the case there. But I think it's well worth it, especially if you have a young person in your household, or you work with young people in your church context, or in any other sense. I had some also wonderful conversations today with Andy Boachi, with Joey Harris, with Brian from Baltimore, with Jeannie Shaw, and Martina Montez from Chicago. Oh, I mean, can't emphasize, how important it is to be at things like this. It's good to watch online and to zoom in, and sometimes we just have to do that. We understand that. But if we can, physically coming and then standing or sitting and talking about life, but then talking about the issues that matter to us, and finding people in a conference like this who've been through some similar things or have some particular insight that can help me or us in my church with things that we're thinking about, looking at and progressing and teaching on. There's nothing like the personal, in-person contact to have those conversations. So can I encourage us, if you can travel, whether it's within your own country or across country borders, to attend conferences that are relevant to you and your congregation, I thoroughly would encourage us to think about that. Put some money aside. Church leaders, put money in the budget. I'm so grateful for churches that have sponsored me to come here and enabled me to travel to other places. And I hope I can bring back enough to make it worthwhile. That's my goal. My hope and prayer is that what I bring back will make that investment worthwhile. But then it shouldn't just be me. Surely more of us, if we can travel and go to things like this, what we can bring back can bring fresh insight and fresh understanding of the way that God is working to help our local congregations and groups. So that'll do for today. I'm going to work on my sermon now for tomorrow. I've been asked to preach for the Oklahoma church here. I'm very grateful for that opportunity. So I'm going to be talking about my faith story, as they've asked me to do, as I've now been a Christian quite a long time. And also to talk about some highlights from Thessalonians. And I'm going to be talking about God and love. Of course, they're connected. But I'm going to talk about the prevalence of of God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit in the letter, how much Paul is comfortable talking about God, and I'm going to be talking about love and some aspects around that as how we find our motivation to love. Where does that come from? The motivation, the right attitude of love, the right words of love, and the right actions of love that are inspired by Jesus for ultimately for one another in our Christian communities. That's what I'll be doing tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. It'll be streamed online if you want to come and watch. I'm very grateful to have some friends there. And then we jump on a plane and I'll be back on Monday. So catch up with some of you then. If I get a chance to post something tomorrow, I will, but I can't guarantee it. It depends on flights and bits and pieces. That'll do for today. Hope you have a great rest of the day after watching this. Thank you for your attention. Drop me any notes you want, any comments, please. Malcolm@malcolmcox.org or wherever you hear or see this recording. And until we see each other again, remember to keep calm and carry on teaching. Take care. God bless.